Hello everybody, welcome back to Beyond the Textbook, and this is where we get real about learning English. Today our special guest is the wonderful Martha, all the way from Ireland, but I'm going to let Martha tell you a little bit more about herself from now. Yeah.
Thank you, Aisha. Yes, I'm Martha from Ireland. I've lived in Malaysia for about 20 years and I'm teach English.
Yeah, and you've been with us for quite a while too, hasn't it? How long is it now?
I believe it's about 8 years.
Really?
I try and forget.
Wow.
Yes, I don't want to feel old, but yes, it's about 8, possibly 9 years.
Wow.
I must go back and look at the actual dates.
Yeah, that's incredible.
But
So
time flies.
you've seen a lot here too. You know, we've grown so much, and now now you're on our podcast.
Yes.
You know, so that's great. So anyway, everyone wants to know, of course, what is our topic today? Our topic is how can teachers teach English to students with no English if they don't speak the same language? It's kind of raises that big question mark,
It does,
isn't it?
and it's a question I get asked very often.
Oh, you do?
Well,
Really?
actually, the question I'm asked is, oh, you speak Arabic?
Really?
You speak Somali?
Yeah.
And I go, no. So then people are a bit confused, and I can understand why they would feel like that.
Yeah, so
because-
what kind of people ask you that? Are they
well,
students?
just my friends, or
Oh, really?
friends of friends, or people I meet. They ask me what I do, so they assume if I'm teaching English in Malaysia that I'm teaching Malaysians. So
Yes,
I tell them
exactly.
no. At the moment, most of our students are probably Arab-speaking,
Yeah.
Somali-speaking students, and they look at me with a little bit of bewilderment. So, beginner students, how is that possible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've actually had that myself, to be honest. And even there are some students who ask, how can a person whose English is maybe their first language or it's their most dominant language teach me? I know nothing. I can't even, I can say my name and that's it. But interestingly enough, here at Elite, and I think in Malaysia generally, the students do request that.
Yeah.
So I guess they just want to throw themselves off that great big cliff and
They're very brave, I have to say, and
Yeah.
I feel students who come into a class with zero English and they have a teacher who doesn't share their language, they're very brave.
Yeah.
I admire them.
Yeah. So tell us perhaps some of the strategies you use to get to their level. So
Okay, so first of all, when I enter a class, it's usually I try to assess them, because although our classes are designed for students with zero English, you often find we have some false beginners. So,
what is a false beginner?
well, a false beginner may be someone who has some exposure to English, whether it be in primary school or secondary school, but they don't feel competent enough, or perhaps they feel they've forgotten it, but they actually have some English, whether it just be nouns or list of vocab, or some of them actually have some grammar. It comes back to them every now and again. So that can happen. There's also probably a distinction between some of our students, as some of our students will use the alphabet in their own language.
Okay, what does that mean?
Their own language, they use ABC to write.
Like Somalis, for example.
Say, for example, Somalis.
Yeah.
So some of them will come in, and although they have no English, zero English, they are familiar with writing the alphabet. Whereas some Arabic students, on the other hand, that's completely new. This system of writing, style of writing.
Right.
So they're probably the most challenging. Students.
Yeah.
But they're actually quite rare in the class. Yeah.
You mean real beginners are quite
real
rare
beginners
these days?
I find they're actually quite rare.
Yeah.
So even our Arabic students, I feel they must have some exposure in school.
Yeah.
Because although they find it difficult to write the alphabet, they are familiar with the alphabet.
Yeah. And I think also with the internet age right now, if they're into football or whatever, which is an international thing, they're going to pick up a few things, you know,
Absolutely,
just without them even knowing. So they're going to have some language, plus of course social media brings that out as well.
Yeah.
So when you're in the classroom, okay, you'd like to assess them first, and then what do you do after that?
Well, during the assessment, I suppose the assessment's a very natural thing. What I try to do is find out what they can do.
Yeah.
Rather than focus on what they can't do. So during the class, it could be, well, usually I would start with introductions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now that might be probably quite new to them, and I would. So, but it makes them feel comfortable, and they get to know each other. Yeah. And they feel a sense of achievement when they can say, "Hello, my name is."
Yes. Yes.
So that's usually a good one. And then when we come to talk about names, that usually lends itself to working on the alphabet.
Yes.
Yeah. So the alphabet can be a good indication of what do they know, what do they not know.
Right.
And it's very interesting when you use the alphabet. Maybe you can ask them, "Can you give me some vocabulary? Can we put some words to these letters?"
Yeah.
Quite often they do it very successfully.
Yeah.
They may not have words for all of them, but they will have football.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the universal word.
Exactly. And if you allow them to use like their own names and their own countries, they will have those. So although it might not be totally English words, we can use the alphabet. So we can work on spelling.
Yeah.
How do you spell something?
Yeah.
And it gives them a great sense of achievement to be able to answer questions.
Yes.
And
I think that's a really interesting thing that people don't realize. That teaching this level is about building confidence, isn't it? As well as the technical side.
Absolutely. I think it's more about building confidence and building kind of an environment where students feel that they can experiment.
Yeah.
And they don't worry about making mistakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think if we can teach them, or if we can show them that actually you're teaching to a native speaker, and we are having a conversation.
Yes.
You have just introduced yourself.
That's right. And
you have told me where you're from. We've got there. Okay, we've stumbled a little, perhaps on the way, but we've achieved something, and I think that's really important.
And I think also, you don't, as a teacher, you don't want to be just constantly correcting them all the time, even though they might say, "Please, teacher, correct me every single step of the way." Yeah. You say, "Yes, I will do that," but actually, you don't. Because it'll just be completely demoralizing for them.
Totally. I mean, that's the last thing you want to do. You really don't want to demoralize anyone.
Yeah.
And another thing, I think you want to challenge them, but you don't want to inundate them.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's also a balance, you know. And that varies from class to class.
Yes.
And from student to student, So that's quite important. So you build on what they know.
Yeah.
You build on what they've studied, what we've done in the previous class. You revise, and you build on it slowly.
Yeah.
You challenge them, but if you feel they're being inundated, you pull back a little.
Exactly. Yeah. So one of the things I know that teachers do is they learn how to grade their language. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Well,
grading your language, I think, is to adjust your language to the level of a student. Now, it's important to do that in a way that doesn't patronize.
Yes.
I feel that I don't want to patronize my students. They're adults.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you can actually, for example, grade your vocabulary.
Yep.
I try to avoid using like phrasal verbs. Or a lot of phrasal verbs.
Okay, yeah.
Or idioms. Yeah. I try to avoid using like grammar terminology.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. True. Yeah.
And then I think sentence structure, when we talk about grammar structure. I think it's important. Yeah. And I think certain subjects or certain contexts in the class lend themselves to certain grammar structures.
Yes.
For example, the be verb we usually start with if we talk about grammar.
Yeah.
We usually start with introductions, questions about yourself, questions about your personal profile.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
we don't
yeah.
want to talk about your plans for next week.
No.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
leave that until another day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's important. When you grade your language, you also have to consider context. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
yes.
What lends itself to this
Yeah.
context.
Yeah. And I guess, like you say, in the very beginning, you're assessing really how much do they know. So, because you're so experienced, you think, okay, unconsciously your brain's going into, I'm going to go down to that level of English, and I can feel fairly confident that the kind of language I'm going to use with them is going to be understandable.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I guess from experience, from my own experience, and also from learning from other people's experience, you can kind of predict at what level what issues will come up.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I suppose as an English speaker, you really have to deconstruct the language for yourself.
That's a good. That's a good
You
point.
know, because when you watch beginners, especially, you look at some of our grammar structure in English and you think, oh, that's so difficult. Like, for example, you want to introduce your name. Yeah. My name is Martha.
Yeah.
I'm Martha. I am Martha. So you're at a beginner level and they already have 3 different systems of grammar almost.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
And the one that it really is tough, I think, for beginner students is when we say, okay, he is Muhammad.
Yeah.
And then his name is Muhammad. So he's his, it's just so unfair, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like,
That,
back up, teacher.
Exactly.
You told me one thing, now you're telling me something completely
and what's
different.
the difference? He's his. So yeah, I think you have to actually stand back and say, you know, this is not just a walk in the park.
No.
This is tough.
Yeah.
You know,
and I do think that it takes a lot of energy on the side of the teacher as well.
And patience.
Yeah, and patience, a lot of patience. But students can pick that up, and I think they really respect that. They are, first of all, probably delighted that they can have someone who's not going to be constantly telling them something in their own language. So they really respect that. But also the fact that they can pick up that you are really monitoring every step of the way what they can say, what they can comprehend, what they can't comprehend, and always adjusting. That's what I think. You're always adjusting. So what about we use textbooks?
We use textbooks and they're wonderful.
Yeah.
And they change.
Yes.
We update them.
Exactly.
Which is great for the teachers, great for the students because the contexts are, you know, more modernized.
Yeah.
Perhaps a lot of them. One thing I would say about them, some of them are a bit Eurocentric.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
the
a
culture.
bit about, you know, let's
yeah.
go to the bar and
but-
meet our friends and have a beer and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is that. But they're what we are, and I suppose it does introduce students to a certain part of European culture. I mean, there is a benefit to that.
Actually, when I first started getting into this, I asked some Arabs, elders, actually, parents and all that, how do you feel? This is the textbook we use. It does have some things about wine and beer and girlfriends and, you know, are you okay with that? And they all said, no problem, teacher, no problem.
Yeah.
That's their world. That's the European world. And we know our world's not like that, but please don't just eliminate it because, you know, you think it's not culturally or religiously, you know, appropriate.
Yeah, well, that's great to know.
Yeah. So at the same time, of course, every teacher has to be aware that.
I think it's great. I mean, it's a learning process for teachers when you're teaching a new culture, and we often get students from different cultures. You know, I mean, they might not be the majority, but it's very interesting when they come in and you realize, oh, you know, something's different, or their thinking can be different.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting to be a teacher. I think
Exactly.
you get to meet lots of different cultures. We certainly learn a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really do.
Exactly. Teachers learn just as much as the students. But I think at the low levels, I I find myself, the textbooks are like gold, because
The
they will.
textbooks are well,
Yeah.
I also feel, I mean, I know some teachers probably feel that they, you can veer away from the textbook,
Yeah.
and it's great.
Yeah.
But I know from a lot of the students, especially beginners, they come in and they're very proud of that book.
Yeah, they clutch it to
You know,
their
they
chest.
have this new shiny book covered in plastic, and they open it. So on my first day, I really want to use that book.
Yeah.
Whether it's, even if it's only a quarter of a page,
Yes.
even if it's only just the introductions.
Yes.
I want to use that book, and we've introduced the book to them, give them an idea. If they feel comfortable then with the book, they're not scared of it.
Yeah.
If they're, if it's a class that feel confident, I might move on and just show them, oh, you can listen. Here's the tape scripts. These are the grammar pages. Or I might leave that until the end of the week. Depends on the class.
Yeah.
But I think the students love that book. It's like a security blanket for some of the students.
Yes, and also, of course, the teachers grade their language already, but the textbook is also totally graded.
Absolutely graded, yeah.
If it's a beginner's textbook, it will only have language that has been taught maybe on previous pages, or it's quite. It's how these textbooks have been created. There's a lot of information has gone into that.
There's a lot of thought. I mean, I
lot of
think for a
research,
teacher it gives a wonderful framework.
Yeah.
I think it really does.
Yeah.
You can feel you can be consistent.
Yeah.
Whereas say from one class to the next class, if you have the next, say you're teaching elementary 1 this month, you may not teach elementary 1 until 6 months, but you can go back to that framework of I know where I'm doing, I know where I am. You don't have to rethink it each time.
Yeah. And what about, you were going to say, you mentioned something to me about technology.
Yeah, I mean, when I started teaching first, we had the textbooks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, just the textbooks.
Just the textbooks.
And a tape recorder.
And a tape recorder, yes. And then we moved on to CDs, and we had some videos. That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fantastic. So we had visuals and pictures. But it wasn't until, I suppose, internet became not so much available, but reliable.
Yes.
Yeah, that we as teachers had this access, you know. And like the internet, it's a scourge for teachers in one hand, but on the other hand, it's a complete blessing, isn't it?
Yes.
Our students are growing up with the internet. The type of student we teach, I don't think has changed drastically, but I think the environment that they're growing up in and living in now has changed.
Yeah.
So for them, the internet is the norm.
Yeah.
So I think for teachers, it's a great tool.
Yes.
There's so much there.
Yeah. And at that level,
that level,
the low level, they are just as engaged in the internet as everybody else.
They're even more so. And one of the things, I think when smartphones became a thing first, as a teacher, I tried to be quite disciplined and get them to turn off their phones and full attention on me, on the class. But I realized it doesn't work. Student. In fact, I've had one student quite a number of years ago now. I remember just asking him for his phone, taking his phone off him, and realizing after a few minutes this guy is, it's like he's gone cold turkey. And I handed it back to him, and I realized, well, actually, I have the same problem. Yeah. I'm addicted to my phone.
Yeah.
We all are. So one of the things that we can do is try and provide apps or activities or use the phone. We can't compete with it.
Right.
Yeah. They're comfortable with their phones.
Yeah.
So if you can get them to move from working completely in their first language and use the phones to work on something in the new language, the language they're learning, I think it's a great tool.
Yeah. So we're really when we're using people when we're teaching people who have no English, we have to understand they actually have exposure to everything else in the same way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So utilizing all these different tools, not just the textbooks and the amazing projector work, internet work, but their phones and everything, help them to assimilate English into their life.
Absolutely. And I find it quite funny sometimes when we give them activities to do on their phones, If I had given them the same activity on pieces of paper, matching pictures and matching words, it gets boring, it gets old.
Yeah.
But because they're doing it on their phones, they can actually spend a long time swiping, scrolling. It seems to suck in their attention. You know, so I think it's a wonderful tool to have in the classroom if we can. I rely on my younger colleagues a lot for, you know, finding new apps, new ideas. So I've been lucky in that sense. We work together in that way and help each other to come up with new ideas. Because as I say, when people have zero English, I know as a teacher you work so hard to bring everything at that level, and you have to bring everything from everywhere. And I mean, if you're in a beginner's class, I mean, one of the things I think it's important, especially in the first the first classes that you have with your beginners class, you can't stick with the same thing for too long. So you try to have like 10-minute blocks or even 5-minute blocks. Okay, you drill and you want to drill things, but you have to do it in different ways, different mediums.
You have to be so creative.
You have to be quite creative. So even in the first class, if you can tell your students, okay, we're going to use your phone and we're going to use an app. And then you have to tell them the English words of how to go on. But quite often those words are the same as the words they use in their own language because they haven't, you know, for example, download, you know, username, password, all of these. So they actually feel, oh, look, we're doing this. You know, so it's another way of building confidence and making them feel comfortable. They have this security. You know.
So Martha, I mean, I think that you've given us so much information about this, and you know, thank you so much for this.
Okay, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me. Great chat.
And thank you everybody who's listening. And if you know someone who is frightened to start learning English, it's really a lot about confidence, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And building that. And so it's okay. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll tune in again next time.
Okay, great.